Good afternoon, colleagues. And I'll be once again chairing our committee's work in rather unusual circumstances. So I'm going to be asking for your patience and indulgence. So welcome again to meeting number 21 of the Standing Committee of Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today we'll be continuing the discussion which should begin on Monday. As always, interpretation is available for this meeting through the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. For members who are participating in person, please keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants and observers at this meeting that screenshots or taking any photos of your screen is not permitted. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, and when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, I would ask you to make sure your microphone is on mute. And a reminder that all comments by members should be addressed through the chair. So we had been debating Dr. Fry's motion, and then we had a proposed amendment by Mr. Genuis, and the debate is still on Mr. Genuis's motion, which I can remind you about, which is that the debate be adjourned until the committee has completed its work on Ukraine. Mr. Genuis had the floor. May I have the floor? Yes, Ms. Bendayan, is this a point of order? No, it is a comment before we move on to Mr. Genuis, if I may. Well, in the spirit of collaboration.
The member wants the floor, but not on a point of order? Is that what I understand?
Vous avez bien compris, Monsieur Genuis.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Genuis, you understood.
The rules, and if the member has the floor without it, I mean, the member wants to raise a point of order to suggest some aspect of process, but if the member has the floor without a point of order, then the member has, that can, the member has capacity to certain things.
So, Ms. Bendayan, may I repeat the question? Is this a point of order? Well, it was simply to recognize the work of the former chair, Sven Smegman, who obviously is not here today. And the chair of the president looks very good on you, but I think we could recognize as a committee the work that was done by our former president, our former chair. I think that everybody around this table would agree to thank and congratulate Mr. Spangman for all of his work as a member of Parliament, for his writing and his work as chair of this committee, the Standing Committee of Foreign Affairs and International Development. Thank you, Ms. Bendayan. And now the floor is over to Mr. Genuis.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. And congratulations on your position today.
Just, if I can, just briefly add to my own thoughts to what Ms. Bendayan said, and I think after Monday's meeting, and seeing the resignation from the chair, I thought, oh wow, but he was clear that it had nothing to do with what took place at this committee, and I know he's very committed to the work that we've done and to continuing work that he cares deeply about. It's been a pleasure to work with him, and I guess we won't have a chance formally to see him as a committee if he's not able to be here today before he leaves. But who knows? Maybe we'll call him as a witness one day and get him to report on whatever his new role is. And so I want to just join my voice to those thanking Mr. Spangman for his work here. Mr. Chair, we're having a discussion about an adjournment motion that we had put forward, and the context of that was very simply that this committee has multiple studies ongoing that respond to emergent, urgent, time-sensitive issues going on in the world right now. We're concurrently working on a study on vaccine equity, on COVAX, and a study on Taiwan, and, of course, a study with respect to the invasion of Ukraine by the Putin regime. And in the midst of that ongoing work, we had a motion put forward by a Liberal member to say that we should prescribe a certain number of meetings to a new study on the issue of abortion abroad, with I think the clear implication that study would include a discussion of what's happening in the United States as well as other countries. And this is in a context where I think members know this, that there seems to be a strategy among Liberal members and some NDP members as well across a broad range of committees to try to reopen the abortion debate and kind of up a discussion about abortion, not just at one committee, but at many committees. There have been motions with respect to it. I know at 3 or 4, and I think there's a likelihood that there's a political strategy here where the government wants to reopen the abortion debate in as many committees as possible because they've decided that it's in their political interest to do so. I think part of that context we know is that I read a quotation from the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was explicit about saying that there was this tactic on the part of the government to try to look for opportunities to reopen the abortion debate because they believe that that is in their political interest. And my humble encouragement to this committee is...
Pardon, Monsieur Ginwis, sur un rappel au règlement.
Yes, there's a point of order. Ms. McPherson?
I'd just like to point out that the member has assumed or has made the accusation, veiled as it may be, that the NDP has been working to bring this forward as a political thing. And I brought this motion forward, or a similar motion forward, at the International Human Rights Subcommittee because it is vitally important for women, because I'm a mother, because I have a daughter, because I am a daughter. It has nothing to do with any political machinations. So I'd like the member to withdraw.
I'm very sorry to have to interrupt you, Ms. McPherson, but I don't think that this is a point of order. This is a point of debate, and you are next on the speaker's list, and so you will have an opportunity to express yourself on the matter. Thank you. Mr. Genuis, if you would like to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for your ruling. If it's not out of order, I do want to take the opportunity to wish the member a happy anniversary. I saw it from social media, so the member will.
Is it today?
Okay, all right. I'll ask permission before offering congratulations to members in the future. The member is up next, of course, and is welcome to, and I suspect she will disagree with a number of the points I've made, but I've presented my perspective on the issue as respectfully as I see it, and welcome the opportunity to hear the views of other members as well. Anyways, just as I was saying, other committees can do what other committees wish, of course, but in the particular global context we're dealing with foreign affairs, we have said let's have a discussion at a future date about the future agenda of this committee, but let's at the very least make sure we complete the work that is required on all of the studies that are in front of us. And that was our first proposal. We proposed a number of motions saying, okay, let's refer this to a subcommittee, to the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure. And that's the normal process, that the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure receives various recommendations from members, and then there's a discussion in the spirit of cooperation about how to manage the committee's agenda in a way that makes sense given the different ideas that are coming forward from members. So we initially proposed, let's refer this issue to the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure. And our friends in the other parties through their votes, expressed the fact that they didn't want to do that. So then we said, okay, can we adjourn debate until we've completed all of the existing studies. Let's return to this question of the agenda once we've completed our existing studies. And again, that was opposed. So we're back to I think a very precise and a very reasonable appeal through the motion that I moved. That is to simply say, let us adjourn debate on this question until we've completed our work on Ukraine. Given what's going on in Ukraine, and frankly, just given my observations about the public comments, the social media comments, and comments in the House of many members on this committee, it seemed that up until this motion was moved, there was a clear consensus that Ukraine was and is the urgent foreign policy priority in front of us. And yet, I mean, I understand that the members on the committee may agree, and yet there may be a PMO-driven strategy that says, no, we want the Foreign Affairs Committee to be talking about something that we decide it's in our political interest to talk about, rather than what's urgently before the committee. And as it happens, I'm a former PMO staffer myself, so maybe at another time I can make some confessions with respect to that. But in
Point of order.
Ginwis, Madame Bendayan.
Ms. Bendayan.
What the Prime Minister's office or any supposed strategy has to do with the amendment that is being proposed. So my point of order would be on a lack of relevance. I do not understand where the member is going. And as many of us have said many times, we are happy to complete the study on Ukraine, the study that I brought forward as a matter of priority. We simply want to vote on this motion.
Merci, Madame Bendayan.
Thank you, Ms. Bendayan. I have had the opportunity to remind you that the chair has always given very broad interpretation to the relevance criterion. And without having to reinterpret my colleague's words, I think he's referring to his personal experience. So if I may, I will ask Mr. Genius to continue with his speech and ask that he try to keep, to the extent possible, to the subject of the motion that's being presented.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair, for your good work.
I mean, respectfully to the member who raised the objection, what I am very clearly, I think, talking about is what is before us, the choice of that is embodied in the motion that I put forward, and that choice is the question of whether we should consider this motion to have the Foreign Affairs Committee of Canada studying abortion along with various other parliamentary committees, or whether we should complete the work that needs to be done on the issue of Ukraine. And I know there have been various interruptions, and so I want to just make a few comments on an issue that I know with respect to Ukraine is very important and speaks to the urgency of the study we have to do on Ukraine, and that's the issue of food security.
Point of...
Okay, come on.
And we may need a clarification from the clerk on this, but does the motion as presented and then amended and supplemented have a date on it that requires study to happen before the Ukraine study? I'm now unclear. Mr. Janis is very clear in his argument that there is a date that we have, it supersedes the Ukraine study, but is that in the motion? I'm having a fail. I have the floor right now as a point of order, Mr. Janis. You're very aware of that.
It's not a point of order. The same point of order.
And I just am misunderstanding the motion, I think, so I may need clarification from the clerk as to whether indeed it has a date that requires a suspension of our current study and then takes us to the next study.
This seems like a point of debate, Mr. Chair.
Êtes-vous en mesure de...
Are you in a position to enlighten Mr. Oliphant on the matter?
If I may, the member has a factual question.
On it, Mr. Janis.
I'd like to speak to the same point of order, Mr. Chair.
Si vous me permettez, Monsieur Ginwis, on va quand même simplement demander à la greffière.
With your indulgence, I would simply like to ask the clerk to bring us some clarifications, and then I will give you the floor on the same point of order.
As it's currently formulated, does not have any dates listed in it.
Thank you. That helps me understand a little better. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Ginwis, sur le même rappel au règlement.
Thank you, Mr. James. On the same point of order.
And that the idea that was raised as a matter of order and not as a matter of debate is a bit farcical. The member wished to make a point in response to a point I was making, and I'm happy for him to make it at the appropriate time by getting on the speaker's list, and I'll respond to his point momentarily. But to suggest that was a matter that seeking clarification about the text of the motion we're debating is somehow a question of order as opposed to a question of debate is, frankly, is beneath that member.
A point of order, Mr. Chair.
Madame Fry, sur un rappel au règlement.
Madam Fry, on the point of order.
So, is Mr. Genuis actually challenging the chair on accepting Mr. Oliphant's point of order, which was a question of clarification
No, I'm not.
to the clerk? Well, it sounds as if you are, Mr. Genuis, and I would really raise that as a point of order, because if you're challenging the chair, then we have to call a vote on your challenge of the chair.
Genuis vient de préciser que tel n'est pas le cas.
Mr. Genuis has just clarified that this is not the case, so I would ask Mr. Genuis to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think I've made my point with respect to the matters of order, and I'll get back to the issue of food security. Just to say briefly that I know many members have raised, in the context of how urgent the discussion of Ukraine and the need for this committee to get to its work on Ukraine is, the importance of what is happening in Ukraine has global implications with respect to food security, with respect to the access to food. And I want to just note a few things from an article on this. Actually, I should start by, with respect to food security, just reading out a tweet from my colleague in the NDP, which is something that I agree with. She said, "We need to talk about catastrophic food shortages around the world right now. Food security is an urgent issue. This is a threat to human life and a serious security risk everywhere. We can deal with this crisis appropriately and timely now, or we will 1,000 times in the future." I think that's prescient, and that relates very much to the work we need to do on Ukraine. Just quoting from this news article, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sent food commodity prices soaring in March to the highest levels ever recorded, bringing to the forefront the global implications of its military offensive on the former breadbasket of the Soviet Union. As Moscow refocuses its military efforts on Ukraine's east, readying massive forces for part 2 of its offensive, analysts have warned a Russian takeover of Ukraine's ports and most fertile stretch of land will have repercussions on Ukraine's food exports to be felt the world over. So I think that's an important part of the context. Mr. Chair, at this point, I'll yield the floor and happily listen to the comments of other members. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Genuis. Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. Ms. McPherson, with my apologies for not being able to consider your anniversary date in my earlier decision, but I would like to take the opportunity to wish you all the best on this occasion, and I'm sure that the members of the committee join me in wishing you a lovely end of day. Without any further ado, now you've got the floor.
And I will say that it would perhaps not be my preference to spend my anniversary with all of you as much as I enjoy you all very much. However, hopefully I will get an opportunity to see my husband of 21 years very soon. Yeah. I'm not going to take up very much time. I'm not interested in filibustering this committee, but I do want to say a few things that are very important that I want on the record. This motion that came forward by Dr. Fry is not time-bound. We can study this in the fall. We don't have to do that right now. We have the opportunity to look at this. This committee has very clearly used this way of bringing forward studies. You know, it was in fact my study in December on Ukraine that I brought forward to this committee that started the study in Ukraine. Ms. Bendayan brought forward a study on Ukraine to make sure that we were looking at this. So nobody in this room thinks that a study on Ukraine is not vital, which is why we have been undertaking it. If you look around this room, the number of people who are celebrating Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian history and honoring Ukrainians today is very apparent. So nobody is saying that. In fact, what we could do is vote in about, I think, probably less than 1 minute on this motion that is before us, to look at this issue going forward, to look at reproductive health for women around the world, something that is vitally, vitally important. The member from Fort Saskatchewan Sherwood Park seems to think it's a ploy. The member for Halton Hills seems to think that trade is more important, that it's not important. But I have to say that realistically, the attacks on women's reproductive rights in the United States, the Supreme Court leak is one aspect of it, but there is multiple states where women's rights are being undermined. There is multiple places around the world, including Ukraine. There is problems with reproductive access in this country. People in this country, people sitting at this table in their constituents, they have constituents that have no access. to reproductive health. So it is a vitally important issue, and it is offensive to me as a mother, as a mother of a 17-year-old daughter, a daughter that I want to make sure that I want to do everything I can to fight for her to always have access to the full range of reproductive services. And how could I come to this place and fight for the reproductive rights of my daughter without fighting for the reproductive rights of every 17-year-old girl in this world? How could I do that? My daughter has a right to get an abortion if she needs one. Everyone's daughter decides how they choose to use their body, how they choose to act. Because you know what, Mr. Speaker? Do you know what we call an animal that doesn't have control over their reproduction? Livestock. We call them livestock. Now, the member for Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, did one other thing the other day that deeply disturbed me. And I would urge him to ask himself whether or not it would be worthy for him to apologize. He mocked gender identity. He chose a political opportunity to mock people who do not identify in cisnormative ways according to his description.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sur un rappel au règlement.
Madam Chair,
We have a point of order.
is attacking my character and saying things that are simply not true. And I'm happy to comment further on the context of what I think she's referring to, but the allegation she's making is totally baseless and respectfully, it's just wrong. So I don't know if the committee will allow me to comment on that or if they'll see it as a point of debate.
Mr. Genuis, in all due respect, I think this is a point of debate. You have asked to be on the list of speakers. You will have an opportunity to express your point of view in terms of what our colleague has just put forth. Ms. McPherson, if you'd like to continue, please.
Respect your ruling, but I just ask if you could clarify it. Are there no limits to what a member can say about another member to insult them falsely?
There are limits, and you know them. If you deem that there has been a breach of your parliamentary privileges, you know what you're supposed to do. But for the time being, I think this seems to be an element of disagreement and debate between two members, and I would invite you to express your opinion at the next opportunity when you have the floor. Ms. McPherson.
So to summarize and to finish, I just want to say one thing. We could pass this bill immediately. This is an important, this is an important motion for us to bring forward. This is an important thing for this committee to look at. And I am prepared to listen to hours upon hours of conservative men telling me what I should think about reproductive health in this world so that it comes to vote. And I would point out that it is, in fact, Mr. Chong's motion about Taiwan that we can't get to today because of the conservative filibuster. And I would point out that it is Mr. Genius's private member legislation that we will not be talking about today because of Mr. Genius filibustering this committee. We could get to our work on Ukraine. We could get to our work on vaccine equity. We could get to our work on Taiwan. We could do so many things that need to happen in this committee, and we're not doing that because the Conservatives refuse to vote. If they actually believe that this is not a study we should undertake, vote that way. Let's get it done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Madame McPherson.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say it's my pleasure to be able to join you all here in this committee, not being a permanent member. It's nice to see all of you. It is, I guess, exactly the reason that it is Vyshyvanka Day for us to be having this debate and show Ukrainian Canadians in every corner of this country that that's not just an empty gesture of people wearing cultural clothes and that all they're prepared to do is do that instead of take seriously the influence, the impact, and the responsibility of the permanent members of this committee on this crucial and urgent issue of the attack on Ukraine. It has been almost 3 months since Putin first attacked. Of course, it was years before that he was building up troops, and Conservatives were calling for government action. It was earlier in the new year that Conservatives called for exactly what the president of Ukraine asked for, which was the provision of lethal weapons so that Ukrainians could defend themselves. And I believe, I think it's true that the solidarity and sincerity among all members of Parliament in the Canadian House of Commons on across all parties is legitimate. I want to believe that everybody who says they want to protect Ukrainians against the unjust and illegal attack by Putin, not just because of the role that Canada can play securing peace and freedom for our allies, Canada being the country which was the first one to recognize the independence of Ukraine. So to carry that legacy and our own national heritage, but also obviously in support and in defense of the very real impact of the attack on Ukraine to Canadians themselves, Ukrainian Canadians in every corner of this country. I happen to represent a riding that is in the top 5 where Ukrainian Canadians live. I grew up in the county of Lamont, just south of a tiny village in what is known as the cradle of Ukrainian settlement in Canada, which is the home of the first 125 Ukrainian families to settle in our country. I'm not Ukrainian, but I'm married into a Ukrainian family, and for you will all know that you become one by osmosis because of the tight-knit relationships, self-reliance, and the carrying on of the traditions of providing for each other and caring for each other among Ukrainian Canadians. So this is a debate that is obviously crucial and urgent, and it's an emergency in terms of the foreign policy, in terms of foreign affairs policy overall, but it's also deeply important, personal, and urgent to Canadians. And so it seems to me that that's exactly why the members of this committee should prioritize finishing the work that you did initiate on the attack on Ukraine. And frankly, I think if you don't pursue this work as the urgent priority that it is, then our gestures and our words and the solidarity that we pledge, it's really very empty, isn't it? And so I would just implore all of the members across all of the parties in this committee to continue to do the vital and urgent work on the attack, on Putin's attack on Ukraine, and take seriously all of the very impactful roles that you can each have to make concrete and constructive solutions and recommendations for how Canada can assist Ukrainians fleeing Ukraine under attack, and also, of course, in the service of the very Ukrainian Canadians that so many of us represent. It is very obvious to me that this should be the top priority for the Foreign Affairs Committee right now. And I do want to recognize the efforts and the work undertaken by the Canadian government so far. We've supported the imposition of sanctions and a number of the other measures, but there is no denying that there are still major challenges in terms of Canada's response to aid the people of Ukraine, and particularly to aid people and families who want to come to Canada for peace and for freedom and for security. And a couple of those areas that really require, I think, your dedicated work and cooperation. And the redoubling of your efforts and your hearts and your minds to this issue, that is so necessary, because there do continue to be major problems despite the efforts that the government has made so far. And I would just point out the issues around the promised expedited visa program. Of course, Conservatives called for visa-free travel, but the reality is this so-called expedited visa program is taking months. It is extremely bureaucratic. In many cases, it is just absolutely impossible for Ukrainians to access the program and to meet the requirements. And so that requires your work to make the recommendations to improve that program. There are a number of other promises related to the 3-year work or study program for Ukrainians, as well as the extended visa stays and open work permits to Ukrainians that are already in Canada and can't go home. But for example, related to the April 9th announcement about this financial support for hotel accommodations and income support, there's still no details. That announcement was made in April, and there's no details on that program or real funding for Ukrainian refugees who have been here for months. So that's an issue, urgent, that your committee ought to study and make recommendations on how to improve. And of course, the government, and again, we take this at face value. I think all members of the party believe this to be true, but the government and Liberal members of Parliament have said that they want to ensure that there is urgent processing of travel documents. And the reality is that hasn't materialized, and there are no realistic and concrete improvements that actually work for the people of Ukraine fleeing the terror and the attacks from Putin. That's a major problem that I think deserves your attention and your recommendations. And not to put a fine point on it, but the truth is that the Samaritan's Purse has actually successfully airlifted more Ukrainians.
I'm just trying to understand the relevance of this. We're not talking about the motion at hand. We're talking about a study we actually have already done and perhaps another one that could be done, but I'm failing to understand how talking about what's happening in Russia or Ukraine has any relevance to the motion request by Dr. Fry or any amendment to it. So we can talk about anything at any time, but it has to have some relevance to the
J'apprécie votre intervention, M. Seraille, mais comme
I appreciate your intervention, Mrs. Rai, but as you know, traditionally, the chair gives a rather broad interpretation to the relevance rule. So if Ms. Stubb wishes to continue by staying as close as possible to the object of the motion, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Stubbs, if you'd like to continue.
Well, I think all of this context is extremely relevant and important to the question about finishing the work on the escalating situation in Ukraine. So, as I had mentioned, the reality is that the Samaritan's Purse has successfully airlifted Ukrainians under attack into Canada more in the last 3 months than the government of Canada has yet to do. So that, given no end in sight to the attacks that have already been going on for the last 3 months, I think, again, merits your urgent attention and prioritization to this issue. I just want to close by telling you a little bit about the experience of a teenager in Vegreville. Members around this committee would note, of course, that the Liberals closed the highest performing and most effective citizenship and immigration processing center in that very community, the town of Vegreville, also a community of longtime Ukrainian families and settlement. And so I guess it is ironic in the worst possible way and tragic, really, that there continue to be these visa processing holdups and legs and backlogs in the system.
I know you've ruled a few times on relevance. This one is now way off. Anything to do with the sub-amendment, the amendment, or the motion, or the Foreign Affairs Committee as it stands. So I can't see any relevance whatsoever, and I would hope you would rule on that.
Sorry, I'd be happy to speak to the same point of order.
Monsieur Ginouis?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, these points really are not consistent with long-standing practice, and members know that. If a member is talking about something else for a period of 30 to 60 seconds, to interrupt that member before they've had any opportunity, if somebody is speaking for 5 minutes and none of it has any relationship to the motion, but the convention in the House of Commons is that we've had cases of people telling long, lengthy background stories, and that's not what the member is doing here, but going on for 5, 6, 7 minutes without reference to the bill, and then concluding by creating a connection to the bill. That's the long established practice. Members across the way know that. I see what they're trying to do, but I think, Chair, you've repeatedly ruled that their points are off. So I hope they will just stop the interruptions in light of your repeated rulings.
Mr. Chair, further to that, I would argue that relevance is relevance. It is a concept that is not hard to understand, and I would say that an IRCC processing plant in Vegreville or anywhere has absolutely nothing to do with the future agenda of this committee, which is not being set but is being proposed as something for us to do in the fall. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Oliphant. Je suis convaincu.
Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. I'm convinced that Ms. Stubbs is going to help us understand the connection between her words and the motion. I have understood that she is preparing to yield the floor to somebody else. So, Ms. Stubbs, if you'd like to conclude.
Yeah, I do, I guess, find it somewhat surprising that the Liberal members don't seem to think that talking about the real experiences, as I was just about to get to, of refugees from war-torn Ukraine is relevant to this very motion, also to their committee. I'm quite certain it's exactly the kinds of experiences that we should be talking about, given the motion's comments about the escalating situation at the Russia-Ukraine border, which has, of course, created 13 million refugees and over 6 million of those who are fleeing from Ukraine. So let me tell you about about the experiences of one of the Ukrainians who are now in Vegreville in Lakeland. It's a guy named Mikita. He is 19 years old, and he came to Canada to play hockey, and he billets in Vegreville in Lakeland. And, of course, no surprise that the community has taken him under their wing. And when the war broke out, when Putin attacked, he frantically tried to keep in touch with his family, his mother, Natalia, and his sister, Anna, who is 16, and he wanted to try to get them here to Canada. He knew his father couldn't come, and his mother considered just trying to send his sister to Canada to safety because she's only 16, but it was hard, of course, to send a minor alone. So Mikita has worked at a tire shop and the community fundraiser to get money for them. The community has fundraised it intensely to get them money to come. They auctioned off his hockey jersey to show support, and he wanted to go get them, but the community begged him not to because he wouldn't be able to get back out. His family barely speaks English, and their only option was a Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel, so Mikita went to a friend for help on their laptop to apply. But, of course, as I know, all of your offices are probably hearing right across the country. It was really confusing, and it took weeks to even even after his approval for his family to then have to make their way to provide biometrics, which aren't available in Ukraine. His mother and sister finally did arrive on April 19th, but with no financial support except for the goodwill and the kindness and the charity of the people of Vegreville. And, of course, they'd like to plan their lives and find jobs since there is no funding available to them from the government. But you can imagine it's not easy, just, for any, like as it would be for any new Canadian or refugee from any country here with the language barrier. So right now they are just in total limbo. The problem comes down, of course, to immigration issues and challenges and delays that Canada so far doesn't seem to be equipped to be dealing with, which is exactly, I think, the the barriers, the challenges that your committee should be looking at when you continue this priority study, which I hope you'll decide to do so that you can make concrete recommendations to make real differences in the lives of all of these innocent people. I think that Makita's story is important to understand the real human aspect of what we're talking about, which often can be theoretical or conceptual or mainly systemic. Makita's family had to go on the website, which being Canada Immigration, of course, was only in English or French. So his mother and sister could not understand, and they did not have regular computer services. So they tried to get on through their phones. But of course, long hold times caused them to give up, which is when Makita went to a friend's house to try to apply. For just his mother and sister, it took almost 4 hours, as they still asked questions about where his mother worked and even went to school with addresses and dates. So he stayed on hold on a very poor phone line, losing her multiple times. After applying, Makita still had to check the government account to try and tell her when he got a message. Then his mother was told to get biometrics and had to try to get a hold of a place to do that in Poland and wait for an appointment. They have no car and nothing is provided for them. But they had to go not only for biometrics, but then after again to submit the passport. So 2 separate visits for refugees to get their application done in a foreign country. Now they are in Canada. Makita's mother, who barely speaks English, does not have a job. The federal government announced that there would be, as I had mentioned before, some short-term income support to ensure their basic needs are met, but of course there are no details. And those who entered under the emergency travel authorization don't know if that will include them or if it'll only be for those who are brought over on chartered flights from the government, from the Canadian government. And of course, the first round of chartered flights from the Canadian government is not, won't show up in Ukraine until next week. So people obviously are calling in, and I'm sure that this is the same in your offices, saying that their applications are sitting because they had an application in prior to visit, and now agents are not completing them for ridiculous reasons, like not knowing if you should give a one-time entry or a multi-entry to refugees coming from a war zone under attack. In another case, my constituent Darren called for his father-in-law, who originally applied to come see his daughter's new baby, and the agent said that they hadn't been approved because they were not sure what type of entry visa to give, single or multi. The system is broken, I think overall, but particularly in this case. And, I think it is up to the members of parliament here who could have an impact, obviously, to put pressure on the minister to provide adequate direction to make these changes that are important in people's real lives. And I would just say if departmental officials in our own Canadian government don't know the answers, I don't know how in the heck vulnerable Ukrainians fleeing for their lives are supposed to figure all of this out. So that's why it's so important that your committee continue your work and redouble your efforts and your commitment to study the situation in Ukraine and to really fulfill your roles as MPs on this important committee beyond gestures and displays and words, to make concrete recommendations, to make a difference for the people of Ukraine, to make a difference for Ukrainian Canadians everywhere, and to help find ways for Canada to help end the attack on Ukraine and bring Ukrainians to safety, which is, of course, something that all of us from all parties keep saying repeatedly that we want to do. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate being here.
Thank you, Ms. Stubbs, Ms. Dancho, and then Mr. Brock, Ms. Gladue, Mr. Genuis again, Ms. Bendayan, Ms. Fry. Madam Bencho.
Chair, and I want to recognize first off, as we debate this motion to adjourn the motion on women's health, I do want to say and recognize how very sensitive this issue is, Mr. Chair. I think particularly women, as I'm seeing on this committee for sure, and I know myself have very strong feelings about this, and it's very, very deeply personal. So my objective today is to certainly ensure that those feelings are respected. That being said, I do feel very obligated to address something the member for Edmonton Strathcona had said. I did take great offense, Mr. Chair, to her generalizing Conservative men in the way that she did. I have served with the Conservative Federal Caucus for 2.5 years, and I know my male colleagues to be good men, compassionate men, hardworking, principled, and patriotic men. I'm also married to a Conservative man, and many of my dearest friends are Conservative men. And so for anyone to generalize the way that she did about Conservative men, I take great, deep, and personal offense to that.
Not a point of order.
Yes, my concern is that the issue of being a male was not the issue. The issue is Mr. Jennis saying, can I speak to the point of order? I don't think I've ever disclosed my gender to this committee. It had nothing to do with male. It had to do with the fact that he was making fun of people whose gender identity
If he can address this point
determined.
on a point of order, then I should have been able to as well.
That is the issue that Ms. McPherson was raising, and I'm happy to quote from the
I'm happy to address it, but he should address this by raising his hand, not by interrupting
If I
someone
may
else.
address
Je
that,
comprends
Mr.
qu'il
Chair.
s'agit d'un débat.
I understand that this is a passionate debate, but to date, it's a matter of interpretation. Ms. Fry?
Madame Fry, je vous prierai de fermer votre micro.
Ms. Fry, I would ask you to turn your microphone off. Ms. Fry, would you please turn your microphone off? Yes, go ahead. What is your point of order, Ms. Fry?
My point of order is this. I am listening to this debate, and I heard 4 people speaking over each other. And so I was asking for there to be order and precedence in people whose names are up for speaking. If a member raises their hand, as the chair well knows, on a point of order, that takes precedence. Mr. Oliphant was speaking to a point of order, and he was interrupted not only by Mr. Genuis, but by 2 other people. And so I would really like to see some order occurring in this particular forum. Thank you.
Madame Fry.
Thank you for your support, Ms. Fry. Mr. Oliphant, Mr. Genuis, I think this is a very relevant debate. But if you wish, Mr. Oliphant, I will add you to the speakers list. Ms. Dancho, if you would like to continue, please.
And I apologize to Mr. Oliphant for not calling him by his writing name. I'm not familiar with it is, but I do not appreciate, Mr. Chair, being told how to feel when I feel deeply personally offended by a comment from the member for Edmonton Strathcona. Mr. Chair, again, I don't feel that there's any place for any man or woman on this committee to tell me how I've interpreted something by another member when she, from my perspective, has deeply insulted Conservative men generally. So I just wanted to put that on the record that how very proud I am of the Conservative men in my caucus, and frankly, how very proud I am of Mr. Genuis. There is no one in Parliament who has stood up for religious minorities across the world with the relentlessness and dedication as Mr. Genuis, and I'm very proud to call him my colleague. On the motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair, I very much agree that Ukraine needs to be the focus, very much. I represent a riding that at least 1 in 4, if not more, of my constituents are of Ukrainian descent, and some are very first-generation Ukrainian. A very dear friend of mine. I also have a large Polish, actually the most Polish folks of Polish descent out of any riding in Canada is in my riding. And a very dear friend of mine, his nephew was killed within the first couple of weeks of the war in Ukraine. He was 26, and there are a number of family members that have been killed in the war in Ukraine with relations in my riding. I represent them when I am in Parliament. And I cannot see anything more important for the Foreign Affairs Committee to be studying or to be focused on than the war in Ukraine right now, and how Canada can play a greater role in supporting them. And further, how we can ensure that our allies, and we can be reaching out to our allies, that they also provide more resources and more support to Ukraine. I do receive, I have to say, considerable amount of comments from my Ukrainian constituents with concern that the Liberal government is not providing enough defense supplies to Ukraine, that they were very late to the game. I think that is clearly something that this committee and the Defense Committee as well should be reviewing, why it took so long to send military defense. That is consistently a piece of information and feedback I receive from my Ukrainian constituents. So perhaps the committee would wish to discuss that in their study or in a future study so that that mistake is not made in the future and perhaps lives could be saved. I think something I found very personally alarming when the war in Ukraine broke out was there was a young member of parliament. She's about my age. She's an opposition MP as well. And her name is Kira Riddick. And she was photographed. She shared something on Twitter to the effect that said, a few days ago, I was a normal legislator, and now I'm fighting for the freedom of my country. And she was photographed with a firearm, a very large firearm. And I will never in my life, for as long as I live, get that image and her tweet out of my head. It was the most relatable moment I had felt concerning a war in a country that we call allies, that we call friends, and a woman just like me who is at her job just like we are right now, and then to think in just a few days taking up arms to defend your homeland, I think is possibly one of the most shocking and disturbing and scary things that I could think of. But I very much support her and the efforts of women there to stand their ground and to defend their homeland and their sovereignty against an aggressor. And I think actually, obviously, President Zelensky, and there's many male leaders in Ukraine and as well involved in this. But I would say that their women are really shining as well. And if we look to the Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, who is 34 years old when she was first elected as the Prime Minister of Finland, she is now, I believe, 37, 38, very young, one of the youngest world leaders in the world right now. She is very boldly and very bravely, following many decades of neutrality with NATO, putting their country forward to join NATO. They share a very, very long border with Russia, and to see a young woman that's similar age to me with that sort of that gumption and that bravery to stand up to one of the most intimidating authoritarian figures in modern times is also incredibly inspiring as a woman politician. And I just very much applaud the Prime Minister of Finland as well as the Prime Minister of Sweden for standing up to bullies, so to speak, and pursuing a NATO membership. And I very much support the Canadian government in supporting those initiatives from the Prime Minister of Finland and of Sweden. And our leader, I think she's been very eloquent on putting on the record in the House of Commons in the Chamber about how important it is that Canadians and members of Parliament understand the severity of what's going on. She said a quote that I thought, really, I remember when she said it, it gave me goosebumps. She was talking to President Zelensky when he had come virtually to the chamber. And she said to him, and I'll just quote her speech, "The kind of leadership that you are showing, sir, is very rare. And it serves as an inspiration to all of us who are elected. You are the leader of Ukraine for such a time as this, and we remain indebted to you." And when she said that, and again, we're looking at, I just mentioned Prime Minister Marin and the Swedish Prime Minister, whose name escapes me at the moment, in looking at many of these leaders, MP Riddick, the opposition MP in Ukraine, and to me, I just continue to think of, should Canada ever face, like, God help us, but should ever face something like this, like, would I be brave enough to do what the Ukrainians are doing? Would you be brave enough, Mr. Chair? Would our Prime Minister, would our leader of the Conservative Party? I hope so. I think we would all hope that we would be. But I think, like our leader had said, it is extremely rare to see this. And I think President Zelensky's leadership and bravery will stand the test of time for being one of the most brave leaders in the Western world in the 21st century. And again, I think on the issue of Ukraine and the importance of this committee's ensuring that it focuses on Ukraine, again, everyone has seen the images, and it's so strange to think that my constituents one day were visiting their families in Ukraine, that their families were coming here to visit us, they were breaking bread, and then we see in Instagram, there's so many videos, and I actually had to stop watching them because of how alarming they were. But you see families huddled in bomb shelters and ruined children's hospitals and maternity wards and dead bodies in the streets and women who were raped and people who were shot in the back of the head, and just absolutely barbaric war practices that I don't think any of us ever anticipated we would be seeing. And to think that the individuals in Ukraine are those are related to the constituents I represent. When I was asked to join the Foreign Affairs Committee today to talk about the importance of this committee focusing on Ukraine, I absolutely took up the opportunity, given how close to home this is for the people I represent. And again, I think we're seeing the global order shift, and that's why Foreign Affairs, more than almost any other committee, should be extensively studying Ukraine. And then I would hope to see that they study what is Canadians' position in the international order, how has it changed relative to the Russian aggression and that posture, as well as what we're seeing with Finland and Sweden. I think that certainly would warrant likely a committee study, and how, again, Canada is looking at its Arctic. In National Security and Public Safety Committee, I ensured to put forward a motion of study that we're studying right now to review Canada's ability to defend itself against Russian aggression should the worst happen. Now, of course, it's highly unlikely, but I think regardless, our duties as legislators is to ensure that...
Point of order goes to relevance again. We are hearing a very interesting work that Madame has been doing in another committee, which is not our committee. I understand that Canada must prepare itself for any eventuality, and I agree with her, but this is not at all related to the motion before us today, which is dealing with reproductive rights of women, 51% of the population, Chair, nor with the proposed amendment as moved by the Conservatives. This is really not in the context and is therefore not relevant. I must say that I feel that Ms. Duncho is trying to keep us on the Ukraine theme, which is one of the central elements to the motion regarding the proposed adjournment as proposed by Mr. Genuis. Yes, I have been following that, but now we're talking about the article. Yes, but I think that it's more a point of view, and sure you will have an opportunity to express your point of view later on because you are on the speaker's list. So, Ms. Dencho, would you like to continue and be as close to the theme of the motion presented by your colleague as possible? It would be very much appreciated.
Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the adjournment motion is we are debating whether we should be adjourning because we should be focusing on Ukraine. I think it would be very odd that we wouldn't be talking about the Canadian foreign affairs context and our ability to defend ourselves given Ukraine. I can't think of really anything more relevant given that the Russian aggression has had all countries in the world, I would think, having to review their own national security abilities. And the eye roll I just saw from the members opposite, I think, is a bit disrespectful. And I would just ask that if you don't agree, okay, go ahead.
Point of order. What is disrespectful is coming to this committee as a substitute and insisting that what we are doing is talking about the agenda of the committee. We are not talking about the agenda of the committee. We are talking about a motion to be considered for the agenda of the committee. That is what is disrespectful.
With all due respect, Mr. Oliphant, that's not a point of order. Ms. Dencho, would you like to continue?
Absolutely. Again, on the National Security and Public Safety Committee, the reason we began the study to review the security posture concerning Russian aggression is that Canada shares a very, very long Arctic border with the Arctic Ocean and Russia. And they have numerous military bases, I think 19. They have over 40 icebreakers, most of them nuclear powered. And to think that any member of parliament doesn't believe that concerning what is happening in Ukraine does not impact the security posture of Canada, perhaps is not fully aware of the magnitude of the situation going on in Ukraine and how it impacts Canadians and the conversations parliamentarians should be having to ensure not only are we supporting our Ukrainian allies, but we are ensuring that we are doing everything we can at home. We can even talk about cybersecurity. Ukraine has experienced significant cybersecurity attacks and threats from Russia. Actually, Canada, who overall does quite well with cybersecurity compared to others, is actually lending support to Ukraine. That may be an issue that this committee would like to review as well, considering the cybersecurity field is growing in importance in terms of its threat to critical infrastructure, to hospitals, to, in Canada's context, to CRA, to global affairs. We're seeing considerable security threats to cybersecurity. I'm very glad and proud that Canada was able to provide expertise to Ukraine in this regard. I would also say that the study at SECU, at the National Security and Public Safety Committee, is relevant to this discussion to underline the importance of staying on the study of Ukraine, and because of the infrastructure that we're looking at in the Canadian context, if we do want to talk about the threat that Russia has on the rest of the Western world, and we're looking at our surveillance technology in Canada, we can talk about NORAD, which is about 4 decades old and has not been updated in quite some time. So again, when we're talking about the invasion of Ukraine, we also have to be reviewing as parliamentarians our ability to defend ourselves should the worst happen, however unlikely. And so we've had numerous leading academic and national security experts underline this position quite clearly, that it would be foolish for parliamentarians not to take this seriously in the Canadian context of what's happening in Ukraine. Not only do we need to focus, Mr. Chair, on supporting our Ukrainian allies, we also need to focus on ensuring Canada is prepared for a cyber attack, for attack on our critical infrastructure. In fact, when I was briefed by the cybersecurity officials of public safety, they said that the worst like the Pearl Harbor event, I asked, what would be the worst thing that could happen? And they said an attack on our critical pipeline infrastructure. So these are the type of conversations we need to be having, both at Foreign Affairs, at National Security and Public Safety Committee. And I've been very pleased but alarmed to hear the testimony from leading national security advisors. Again, I think everyone recognizes, however unlikely, it is very important that we have these discussions. And I think what we're seeing as well when we talk about Ukraine is that a lot of our allies are leading the way in providing arms and support. The Americans, of course, have provided billions and billions of dollars. I heard one statistic that the amount, I think it was, I want to say 21 billion of arms they've committed. And various defense technologies and tools is more than the entire Ukrainian federal budget. So that gets considerable, and perhaps that's something this committee would also like to look at, perhaps, or perhaps Defense Committee, of what kind of arms are being provided. Why is Canada providing what it is? Are we providing everything that we can? Unfortunately, I don't have the expertise to go into all of the technologies that Canada has in our arsenal and which ones that should be provided that have not yet been. But I do think that overall, this committee should be focusing on Ukraine. I very much appreciate the efforts of my fellow Conservative committee members for making this point very clear, and I look forward to their testimony and what they have to say. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Madame Dancho. Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho. Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it is indeed a pleasure to be here on a Thursday afternoon at the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'd like to start off by making an observation to, and again, I'm not familiar with Mr. Oliphant's writing, but I was a little bit concerned about his commentary that we're nothing but substitutes, seat fillers. Well, quite frankly, given the international importance of the Russian aggression against this country, this is a humanitarian issue. This is a parliamentarian issue. And we, as proud conservatives, I don't know what's so funny, Mr. Chair, but this is serious business that this committee is undertaking.
Veuillez poursuivre, s'il vous plaît.
Please continue.
Thank you. So my point is, when I was asked by Mr. Jennings to assist, I took it as a badge of honor. I took it as an opportunity on a grander scale to express my concerns as a proud parliamentarian in the 44th Parliament, a new parliamentarian, I might add. My riding is Brantford-Brant. It is the home of a significant Ukrainian population. I grew up with many Ukrainians in grade school and high school and have many Ukrainian friends to this day. And I felt the impact on the local stage as to how this war has impacted. So when asked for the opportunity to come here and talk about my feelings, I didn't view it as simply a seat warmer or as a substitute. it gives me an opportunity beyond the restrictions of a 30-second QP question or an SO31 to truly express my views. So I wanted to put that on record because I was offended by that. I also wanted to thank my colleague, Ms. Dancho, who stood up for her conservative male colleagues in relation to the member statement from Edmonton Strathcona, because I viewed it in much the same light that Ms. Dancho did. It was offensive. It was uncalled for. And just for those members, I see a few members who know my background, but for many members who may not know my background, I left a 30-year law career to pursue politics. And in the last 18 years of those 30 years, Mr. Chair, I was a Crown attorney who took great pride as a specialist in dealing with the most serious, extreme, violent matters in my community, particularly in the realm of spousal abuse, and sexual assault, and children exploitation offenses. And I took great pride in being a strong advocate and a champion for women issues. I'm a proud married individual. I too am going to be celebrating an important milestone this October, 20 years with my spouse. And I'm raising 2 teenage daughters who turned 13 not too long ago. So I don't call myself a feminist, but I certainly respect women's views, and I'm a champion of women's rights. And I say that because it's important to distinguish the importance of this particular study that you've already embarked on. I don't know how many meetings you've had prior to this intervention, but I know that it had been started some several weeks ago. And my point, Mr. Chair, is to Ms. Fry's motion, the most pressing issue that this world is facing right now is happening in the Ukraine. It's not just impacting Ukrainians. It's not just impacting the citizens who are actually there fighting the resistance. It's not just impacting the residents who have been displaced and have fled the country looking for a safe passage and refuge. It's quite frankly affecting all of Europe. It's affecting the entire world. There isn't a day that goes by in the House, quite frankly, even if I refer to some of my observations of politics down south, there isn't a day that goes by that you don't either read about it or hear about it or watch it on television, that the leaders of this country, leaders of the United States, they're all blaming inflation and the rise in everything, gas prices, housing issues. It's all Putin's fault. So to say that we should be looking at standing down, adjourning, deferring, whatever nomenclature you want to use, this important study, to then embark on another study, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm talking about timing, Mr. Chair. The only reason this is being brought up, and I'll deal with the elephant in the room. The only reason this is being brought up is because what's happening south of the border. The leak from the Supreme Court and the backlash and the fear and the worry. It's not happening here in Canada. We've got settled law. It's been settled law in this country for several decades. There's no urgency, Mr. Chair. There is no rush to suspend this most critical, important study, quite frankly, of my lifetime and the lifetime of my wife and my children, because we are on the brink of World War III. We are on the brink. We're within a hair's breadth of Putin invading a NATO country. And we all know what Clause 5 says. So this is extremely important and ought not, in my view, as a guest of this committee, ought not to be derailed by another study. I'd like to spend some time now talking about my personal connections to the Ukrainian people. I talked about my ties in my hometown. I was a very proud MP, Mr. Chair, when a fellow constituent of mine reached out to me for the first time, introduced himself, and came up with an idea that I believe I was the first member of Parliament to advance and speak about very proudly in the House on an SO 31. He said, "What do you think about the idea, Mr. Brock, of having a twinning agreement with my hometown and a town in Ukraine?" I said, quite frankly, I had not thought about it, but what a wonderful gesture, what a wonderful idea. We talked about it literally within 2 weeks with the able assistance and most important assistance of my legislative assistant, which I'll talk about a little more in detail, Vladimir, who's also known as Walter. We were able to consult with the mayor in Kamyanets-Podilsky in the Ukraine, and we were able, with the mayor in my hometown of Brantford, to sign a twinning agreement. The town of Kamyanets-Podilsky, Mr. Chair, is located in southwest Ukraine near the borders of Moldova and Romania. Like Brantford, Kamyanets-Podilsky has a population of 100,000 people, centers on manufacturing, tourism, which are two key sectors of my riding in Brantford-Brant. And now we are taking active steps with social agencies and Ukrainian churches, again with the assistance of both mayors and my legislative assistant, Walter. We're taking steps to welcome in thousands of Ukrainian refugees into my community. We are looking at various homes, billeting. We are looking at cultural centers. We are looking at places where ordinarily would only be open for spring, summer, and fall camping. We're looking at opportunities to make the lives of those Ukrainians fleeing the persecution that much better. So I'd like to provide a bit of a historical account, because I don't know if it's ever been shared with this committee, but I was able, in the time that I was asked to consider my participation today, to do a little bit of research. I've always been fond of history. I majored in political science and history in university. So I found an article called "The 20th Century History Behind Russia's Invasion of Ukraine," which I'd love to share with the committee at this time. Before Russian forces fired rockets at the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, seized Chernobyl, site of the world's worst nuclear accident, and attacked Ukrainian's second largest city, Kharkiv, Russian President Vladimir Putin shared some choice words. In an essay published on the Kremlin's website in Russian, Ukrainian, and English last July, Putin credited Soviet leaders with inventing a Ukrainian republic with the Soviet Union in 1922, forging a fictitious state unworthy of sovereignty out of historically Russian territory. After Ukraine declared its independence in 1991, the president argued Ukrainian leaders began to mythologize and rewrite history, edit out everything that united Russia and Ukraine, and refer to the period when Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union as an occupation. The historical reality of modern-day Ukraine is more complex than Putin's version of events, encompassing a 1,000-year history of changing religions, borders, and peoples, according to the New York Times. Many conquests by warring factions and Ukraine's diverse geography created a complex fabric of multi-ethnic states. Over the centuries, Mr. Chair, the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires, Poland and Lithuania, have all wielded jurisdiction over Ukraine, which first asserted its modern independence in 1917 with the formation of the Ukrainian People's Republic. Russia soon wrestled back control of Ukraine, making it part of the newly established Soviet Union and retaining power in the region until World War II, when Germany invaded. The debate over how to remember this wartime history, as well as its implications for Ukrainian nationalism and independence, is key to understanding the current conflict. In Putin's telling, the modern Ukrainian independence movement began not in 1917, but actually during World War II. Under the German occupation of Ukraine between 1941 and 1944, some Ukrainian independence fighters aligned themselves with the Nazis, whom they viewed as saviors from Soviet oppression. Putin has drawn on this period in history to portray any Ukrainian push for sovereignty as a Nazi endeavor, says Markian Dubansky. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his surname, and I apologize on the record, a historian at Harvard University's Ukrainian Research Institute. It's really just a stunningly cynical attempt to fight an information war and influence people's opinion, he adds. Dobzhansky is among a group of scholars who have publicly challenged Putin's version of the Nazi occupation of Ukraine and the years of Soviet rule it's sandwiched between. Almost all of these experts begin their accounts with the fall of the Russian Empire, when tens of thousands of Ukrainians fought alongside the Bolshevik Red Army to establish the Ukrainian People's Republic. Ukrainians continued to fight for independence until 1922, when they were defeated by the Soviets and became the Ukrainian Soviet Republic of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, also known as.
Excuse me, Chair, point of clarification.
Thank you. As much as I'm enjoying this history lesson, it is now almost 5 o'clock, and I wonder if I can ask the clerk for clarification. I'm actually quite concerned that there may be witnesses in the Taiwan study that are somehow waiting for us to get to that testimony. It was my understanding that we were supposed to be studying the issue of Taiwan today. Madam Clerk, do we have our witnesses on the Taiwan study waiting to hear from our committee?
Madame la greffière.
Madam Clerk.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Witnesses waiting today.
Were they canceled for this filibuster?
They were rescheduled.
Thank you.
Just on that point of order, I wonder if there might be unanimous consent to adjourn debate on this matter so we can proceed to those witnesses. Is there unanimous consent to do that? No.
Monsieur Brock, vous êtes invité à.
Mr. Brock, I would invite you to continue with your intervention. I see that you're reading a document in support of your intervention. It is very interesting, but I was wondering whether it was your ultimate intention to explain to us the connection between what it is that you're reading and your point of view on this subject. Please continue, Mr. Brock.
Thank you for the intervention, Mr. Chair. I thought the title of the article was self-explanatory. It's the 20th century history behind Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I thought it prudent, because I am a history buff, I thought it prudent to share the historical conflict that Russia has had with Ukraine. In fact, I did even further research on the history of Ukraine. I don't think you wanted me to talk about before Christ days, but I was prepared to do that. There is such a wonderful, fascinating history behind the country of Ukraine. But to the point of what we're talking about is it's important to talk about and to learn about the previous historical conflict in relation to the current conflict. This particular article starts off by talking about the historical end of things and then moves into modern day. So there is a connection and there is relevancy. May I continue?
En vous invitant, M. Brock, à vous en tenir.
I would invite you to stick to the text of the motion as presented by Mr. Genuis, that the debate on Ms. Fry's motion be adjourned until such time as the committee has completed its work on Ukraine. I understand that the historic bases for the conflict currently occurring in Ukraine are important to understand the importance of coming back to this debate. However, we must remember that we need to hear your point of view on the reasons for which we should be adjourning the debate to continue on the subject of Ukraine. Please continue, Mr. Brock.
And the reasons were stated at the outset of my intervention, that I am here to share my personal thoughts on the matter as a parliamentarian, where I felt that I was impeded in my ability in the House because of time constraints. And I wanted to highlight the passion I have on this particular issue and the critical urgency by which this current study ought not to be adjourned to allow another study which, quite frankly...
Mr. Brock.
Sorry?
Veuillez pour...
Please continue, Mr. Brock.
So, with your permission, I'll skip ahead some various paragraphs, sir, because I think there is relevancy in this document. So I will not comment on, there's a couple of pages that talks about Russians' involvement in the Ukraine in World War II. I will move on to current 21st century issues, Mr. Chair. Putin has referenced Ukrainian nationalists in service of his own political agenda of portraying modern Ukrainians as Nazis. I've referenced that. Prior to Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea, many Ukrainians viewed Bandera and other freedom fighters in a less favorable light, says Mr. Shevel. After, however, she noticed a shift with these individuals, some of whom fought alongside the Nazis being called heroes. The Soviets, once held up as liberators from the Nazis, were now the bad guys again. Bandera may no longer be the official hero of Ukraine, but his memory and that of other 20th century independence fighters endure. In 2015, Ukraine passed a series of decommunization laws calling for the removal of communist monuments and the renaming of public spaces in honor of Ukrainian nationalists and nationalist organizations, including those known to have participated in the Holocaust. The legislation has received pushback from scholars who see it as a whitewashing or ignoring the dark sides of these movements and their activities. Shevel agrees that a complete reversal in framing is probably not the best outcome, although the previous Soviet narrative was very one-sided. She cautions against replacing it with an equally one-sided narrative that labels Ukrainian nationalists unconditional good guys. Either way, Shevel says, the issue is one that should be debated internally, not by a foreign invader. It's problematic, but it's a domestic debate. Dobzhansky, for his part, believes Ukraine is entitled to its own version of history and that Ukrainians should be allowed to choose how to present their own experience. He praises local researchers' efforts to study the Holocaust and open their archives and notes that Ukraine's current president, Mr. Zelensky, is Jewish. Ukraine has begun the process of controlling the darkest pages of its past, he says. In today's charged atmosphere, saying anything critical about Ukrainian nationalism or calling attention to Ukrainian nationalists' involvement with the Nazis can be seen as supporting Russia's depiction of Ukraine as a Nazi nation. This Russian narrative is nothing new, Mr. Chair. It's part of a long-term Russian information war, I would call misinformation war, on the Ukraine. Putin's ahistorical justifications of the invasion doesn't surprise scholars. What does surprise scholars is the outpouring of support he's seen for Ukraine, even with the very popular American comedy skit Saturday Night Live paying tribute to the beleaguered nation. Scholars theorize that the outraged response to the invasion is tied to society's relatively recent re-examination of colonialism. Because Ukraine was successfully integrated into the Soviet Union after World War II, Dobzhansky doesn't see the period leading up to Ukrainian independence in 1991 as an occupation so much as a relationship between a colony and a colonizer. By waging war on Ukraine, Putin is, in essence, trying to hold on to a colony. Russian leaders basically don't recognize any Ukrainian historical agency except the agency that they imagined for them, says Dobzhansky. Ukraine and the world seems to be imagining something different. I think the takeaway there is the false narrative that Putin is sharing with the world as his illegal justification for invading this country. It may appease and it may pacify his nationalists in Russia because of its state-controlled media, but the rest of the world does not buy into this misinformation rhetoric. And the issue regarding colonization is troubling because we all know Putin is a relic of the USSR. We all know about his pursuit of power at all costs. His international war crime legacy and history is not lost on me, Mr. Chair. Which begs the question, what country is next? Is he going to be satisfied just with the Ukraine? Is he looking at some of the other Baltic nations? Right now we have what could be described as a ground operation in the Ukraine. We have ground, we have airstrikes, we have missile strikes. But what about the cyber war? And there is a cyber war currently happening with respect to this conflict. And I want to share my thoughts and my concerns on that issue at this time, Mr. Chair. It has widely been assumed that the Western world saw the last of its hot conventional wars with the end of the Second World War as the world grew increasingly integrated economically, making this type of conflict inefficient. The liberal international order assumed rationality, would prevail, and countries would choose the economic benefits of these relationships over conflict. Economics became a new tool to replace traditional military means of force if peaceful relations deteriorated. Sanctions, preferential trade, and exclusion from financial institutions all became methods of punishment and retaliation. With the rise of the internet, the world became further interconnected, but also more vulnerable to attack through cyberspace, as critical infrastructure, finance, and access to information have all come to depend on online systems. Warfare came to be regarded differently, with cyber warfare expected to be the future of conflict. Yet Russia invaded Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022, launching a full-on conventional war. Western countries rushed to apply economic pressure, applying sanctions. And I will, after this particular article, start talking about the history of the Magnitsky sanctions talking about the origin of those sanctions, the man himself, because it's important to put everything in context, Mr. Chair. So applying sanctions, excluding Russia from the SWIFT system, payment systems and banks, and cutting access to the country, banning travel, and a host of other harsh conditions. Meanwhile, the internet has been flooded with real-time information on the invasion. However, disinformation and censoring are rampant, with civilians, combatants, world leaders, governments, and journalists competing to post the latest updates. Cyber attacks are playing a role in the conflict, although have not been the sole or even most important aspect of the hostilities. Furthermore, they are coming not just from state-sponsored organizations, but non-state hacker groups and even volunteer hackers on both sides. Private sector organizations were drawn into the conflict as some chose to suspend services to Russia or support cyber resiliency in Ukraine. In recent years, Russia has employed many devastating cyber attacks against Ukraine, including on the country's electricity grid in 2015 with the virus NotPetya, on the Ukrainian financial system, which spread globally, and other Eastern European countries. Considering Russia's extensive history of hacking and policy of information warfare, this raises the question, why are we not seeing a cyber war, and will we? To fully answer that question, it's important to get a context on the record as to what really is a cyber war. Cyber war is a fairly contested term, and not all believe that the cyber war actually exists. For the most part, nation-states look to international law and the rules on use of force and self-defense regarding the legality of cyber operations. The Tallinn Manual and Tallinn Manual 2.0 both analyze extensively.
Point of order, Chair. About 20 minutes ago, you invoked the importance and of relevance and of connecting the articles being read by my colleague to the amendment before us and to the motion on women's reproductive rights, which is before us. I wonder whether we are able to see this connection for relevance. Thank you for this reminder, Ms. Bendayan. I would like to remind Mr. Brock that it is acceptable to discuss external documents during debate. However, care must be taken to express one's own point of view regarding the terms of the motion presented by Mr. Genuis. I would invite Mr. Brock to conclude his reading and to draw the connection.
I'll conclude my reading, and I will put my own personal thoughts on that. And thank you. And why its relevancy for the benefit of Ms. Bendayan. There is relevancy to this, Mr. Chair, so I will continue. The popular vision of cyber war is one in which critical infrastructure, telecommunications, and internet, and all connected systems are completely shut down, effectively crippling society. We have seen this to varying degrees in the aforementioned case of Russia's attacks on countries in its neighborhood, as well as on the infrastructure in other countries, such as the Colonial Pipeline attack in the United States, but nothing to such a complete extent. However, despite the increasing predictions of this sort of cyber war, of which there is no broadly accepted definition, it has not made an appearance thus far. There could be many reasons for this, one of which, of course, is that we simply don't know it's happening. After all, it is often strategically useful in a cyber attack to remain undetected for as long as possible. It could also be that this simply would not meet the strategic goals of the invasion. In this case, Russia has long considered Ukraine as key to its plans for many strategic reasons, including territory and warm water ports. Ironically, Western sanctions in the wake of the 2014 annexation made Ukraine even more important to Russia's geoeconomic ambitions as part of a land route for energy exports. Based on its goals, this type of complete cyber war seems unlikely to be useful. This is not to say that cyber has not been used in this conflict. However, these activities have been used in different ways as a supporting activity of the war, aiming to accomplish the two main goals that cyber activities usually attempt to achieve: propaganda and disruption. Cyber attacks cannot gain territory, but they can disrupt the other side's operations, target infrastructure and civilians, and affect public opinion during the process of gaining physical territory. These operations are simply better suited to spreading disinformation and confusion and attempting to cause distrust and chaos, bolstering the conventional forces. So many on this committee may be asking, when is Mr. Brock going to get to the point? And I will eventually, but there's more to add, Mr. Chair. And the next question I want to put to the committee and provide some explanation is the question: what cyber activities have we seen so far in the Russia-Ukrainian conflict? Propaganda and disinformation have been widely employed in this conflict, and the reach of these activities has been global. Social media has played a role in conflicts before, though this truly global scale is unprecedented, especially among youth. Young Russian TikTok influencers posted videos with a justification of the invasion, all apparently following the same script. Young Ukrainians also took to TikTok, as well as other platforms such as Instagram, to post their own videos of updates. While many sincerely try to ensure their information is as accurate as possible, this is not always easy, especially with just as many people deliberately spreading disinformation. Some examples include attempts to cause fear and panic. Russians found local Telegram chats and posted false warnings about upcoming bombings to scare citizens away. People created Discord servers for updating and commenting and live stream battles online in addition to news footage. Social media was not only used to spread information, whether it was true or not, but to boast morale and push narratives. And much of the information circulating on social media is in favor of Ukraine. Videos and photos of President Zelensky went viral. From his impassioned speech to our parliament, Mr. Chair, about defending the country, to the end to posing with his dogs. There were photos of Ukrainian couples getting married on the front lines and citizens crowding the streets wanting to get weapons and join the fight. In Russia as well, videos of Russians protesting the war and getting detained started to circulate. And Ukrainians posted videos of Russian soldiers surrendering or being captured. Disruption and espionage have been used by both sides, with Russia hacking government ministries and defacing Ukrainian websites even before the invasion, Mr. Chair. The most substantial cyber attack so far, which has not officially been attributed to Russia at this time, is the hack at Viasat, a satellite communications provider which impacted other European countries as well as Ukraine. The American company is still working to bring users back online and recently stated that they are still actively defending the service from malicious activities. Russia has also actively blocked Western social media, including Canada, and created what is being called a fake news law to control the narrative at home. It also threatens steep fines for Wikipedia if it does not remove certain information about the war that it considers inaccurate. Meanwhile, Ukraine's volunteer hackers and other hacking groups, including the group called Anonymous, have also made progress in disrupting Russian government websites and services. So far, however, there have been no largely debilitating cyber attacks on infrastructure, with the extensive damage done coming from conventional attacks and weapons. Which begs the question, Mr. Chair, if we haven't seen it so far, will we? For the foreseeable future, cyber activities will likely remain in the realm of propaganda and disruptions of communications and services. In this conflict, complete cyber war does not appear to be strategically useful, though cyber activities, including disinformation, will continue. Disinformation will remain a powerful tool, especially as digital propaganda techniques using artificial intelligence become increasingly sophisticated. The environment for cyber operations and disinformation is increasingly complicated, which has been demonstrated in this conflict. The involvement of new actors, ranging from youth on social media to private companies, both large and small, to any civilians engaging with online content, makes for an environment impossible to control and potentially creating a variety of new targets in conflict other than states. Experts also warn that civilian infrastructure will increasingly be a target of cyber operations. Sensitive infrastructure, including nuclear weapons, is a serious concern that is especially difficult to discuss considering its highly classified nature. While our interconnected systems are convenient, there is always a risk of compromise. The risk of cyber attacks in retaliation for sanctions, Mr. Chair, remains high. We have, as a country, sanctioned Russia, as have many other countries in this world. Mr. Chair is probably on the list of several politicians in the 44th Parliament who have been banned. The threat to Canada is real, Mr. Chair. The risk of cyber attacks in retaliation for sanctions remains high, but being the first country to launch a complete cyber offensive would probably be costly in many ways, and some experts believe it could even lead to the cyber equivalent of mutually assured destruction. It seems unlikely in the current circumstances that cyber war will come to the West, but it is vital to have cyber defenses on high alert to prepare for any possibility. And I hope that this committee spends some time to hear from experts and witnesses on this very real risk to this country. Canada's intelligence agencies are preparing for an increase in cyber threats and warning Canadians to be vigilant in their online activities. If our security experts are giving us that warning, Mr. Chair, it's incumbent upon this committee to heed those warnings. The last part of this article that I will read various portions of, Mr. Chair, is titled How to Be Strong, Secure, and Engaged in Cyberspace. In 2017, the Department of National Defense released its Strong, Secure, and Engaged Defense Policy, which envisions Canada's armed forces as agile.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Monsieur Sarai.
Mr.
Sabay.
A colleague of mine and serves in my other committee too. And Mr. Janice said last time the definition of a filibuster is when you start reading articles and you read over and over in articles. That's the definition of a filibuster. And Mr. Brock actually said the same thing in our other committee, and I have a lot of regard for him. His judicial mind is very astute, and I'm just wondering how this is not a filibuster if we're reading articles from national security or cyber security things and how it's relevant to this. Would like him to enlighten me, or perhaps the chair can enlighten me, if that contradicts the definition of a filibuster or it stays relevant.
Alors, Monsieur Sarai, Monsieur Genius.
Mrs. Ryan, Mr. Genius may have his definition or their definition of what a filibuster is. I've already had the opportunity to indicate that it is not unusual during parliamentary debates that we see excerpts of texts being used. I would say that it's rather unusual to read text after text, and some could think that there is a wish to use this as a dilatory measure. I have asked Mr. Brock on several occasions to draw the connection between his text and his personal viewpoint on the motion as presented by his colleague, Mr. Genuis. I would ask him again to present his point of view to us with respect to the motion that his colleague has brought forward. Please continue, Mr. Brock.
Doing that, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I have been absolutely doing that. I have read out, probably about 5-10 minutes ago, the warnings of Canada's security intelligence that we need to be aware of the risks of a cyber attack founded by Putin and his misinformation agenda. So my suggestion is it's important that we put that into context as an item for further consideration in this committee, and I did provide my personal opinion. I don't know, maybe you didn't hear me correctly, Mr. Chair, but I invited this committee to perhaps look at calling in some experts from Canada's security intelligence and other experts in this particular area, because Canada needs to secure not only its borders, but also its cyber international domain. So it's important that these warnings be shared with this committee. I'm almost done, Mr. Chair. I'm sure the committee would be very happy to hear that. I've got basically two paragraphs to read, and I would really like, I think it's important that the whole article be on the record and as an invitation for further witnesses that this committee can hear from. So the warning is how to be strong. How does Canada remain strong to cyber attacks? Canada must reaffirm its commitments to security alliances, including NATO and NORAD, to maintain a peaceful international system. Staying secure means upholding its relationship and contributing its fair share. I could probably go on for another hour as to whether or not Canada is living up to that obligation to contribute its fair share, but I'm sure that I will be receiving several points of order on that, so maybe I'll defer that to another day. NATO recognizes cyberspace as a domain it must be able to defend as effectively as land, air, or space, and is committed to cyberspace being peaceful and secure. Canada also believes that a peaceful and secure cyberspace is necessary to its security, economy, and democratic values, and that collaborating with allies is necessary to achieve this. in order to realize its vision of security and resilience, innovation and leadership, and collaboration in the national cybersecurity strategy, contributing to NATO's efforts, especially the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, is imperative. If Canada seeks to support NORAD modernization, particularly in detecting and deterring threats in all domains, including cyber, and promoting research, development, and innovation, it will require significant investment and commitment. And the last paragraph is, how does Canada remain secure? Strong emphasis on digital literacy in schools and workplaces and free independent journalism can help foster trust, establish reliable channels of information, and spread awareness. Canada should use its advanced position in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence to reinforce defensive strategies and detection abilities for sophisticated disinformation techniques. Finally, our digital infrastructure and communications are dependent on technology such as satellites in space, which is a dangerously contested and crowded environment with virtually no norms and outdated international law. Canada has historically been an important contributor to space technologies and was the third country in the world with its own satellite in space. Space has been identified as a strategic asset that is essential for security and sovereignty. Canada needs to work with its allies to establish better governance in space, building off the extensive work done to write a manual on international law applicable to military uses of outer space. And on that note, I have completed my intervention, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity.
Merci, Monsieur Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I note that there are only a few minutes left. I have understood that we will not, for technical reasons, be able to continue far beyond the allotted time. And so with this in mind, Ms. Gladue.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I just want to say that you're doing an excellent job of moving things along. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that I'd been to this committee several times, and I wanted to recognize the work of the former chair as well, and to wish him well at his new responsibilities with the UN. So I'm very glad to be here speaking about this today because I have 5 main themes to cover on why I really think this committee needs to, use the precious time that's left of the committee to focus on the Ukraine. So everyone is aware of the war that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, but I want you to know that in my riding of Sarnia-Lambton, we have people that are actually have gone over to Ukraine and are on the ground in Ukraine as well as in the surrounding countries. They're at Medica. I know my colleague across the way, Mr. Asasi, was there with another one of my colleagues. But I have folks from my riding that are there that have set up stations to help the Ukrainians that are fleeing the country. The various churches in my area have missions. They've actually created years ago churches and orphanages and all kinds of things in Ukraine. And so there are still people there who are giving us a daily update on what's happening. And our entire community, many organizations have reached out, and we're trying to bring about 100 families to Sarnia-Lambton. So I'm certainly seeing on a daily basis the urgency of the situation. I mean, it's been 3 months. The war is not getting better. It's certainly getting worse. And we're seeing a number of things that are not going well and a number of things that are gaps that need to be addressed. And then we see an escalation. And so those are the things that I really want to talk about today. Now, in terms of the efforts in my riding, I could tell you many stories, but really, let's talk first of all about the people that are on the ground in Ukraine and the situation there. Certainly, people are without electricity, some without water. We've all heard and seen the various social media tapings of people that are in subway stations underground and the constant bombings and everything else. So, it's urgent. And I think that is one of the main reasons why this committee needs to focus on the situation and address it. At the same time, there's 6 million people that have, left the country in the hopes of going somewhere. And the problem is, it's really taking way too long to get them out there. There was this one lady, Tanya, with her 2 kids, and she was in Ukraine and we have a place for her in my riding. And so she had to leave with her 2 kids on a Saturday to go to Warsaw to get her biometrics, and then ended up, the embassy wasn't open Sunday, and then Monday the system went down because of the overload from everybody applying. The same thing on Tuesday. Then Wednesday she gets told that she can have a biometrics appointment in a month. Well, what is she supposed to do with 2 kids in Warsaw and no money for a month? So, that is certainly something that the government needs to address is, they exempted children from the biometrics requirement, which is great, but I don't know any mother that's going to send her children off to Canada where they don't speak the language, without having they have
point
to
of
have
order,
biometrics,
Mr.
so it
Chair.
doesn't really help.
It is reaching the end of our scheduled time for this committee meeting, and I thought that before you suspend the meeting, it would be important for us to see whether or not we could continue the meeting, because we would very much like to bring this to a vote. We could do 3 pretty quick votes before that. I don't know the situation with respect to House Resources, but I would like us to vote on this fairly quickly so that other committees could do their work, and we could then continue with our Ukraine study. The Conservatives don't seem to be aware that actually their filibuster is stopping us from doing the work that they're asking us to do in their filibuster. There is a problem with the logic of that, because we'd like to do it. So before we...
Je comprends de votre intervention, Monsieur Oliphant.
So if I understand your intervention, you asking unanimous consent to move to the vote. So is there a consensus? So there is no consent. So Mrs. Gladue, we are going to have to suspend, and you will be able to continue during the next meeting of this committee, and this committee is now adjourned.